Good night, everyone. It's Tim Ashe, President of the Vermont State Senate, here with my evening update on Vermont's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to talk about 3 updates tonight, and tomorrow I hope you'll tune in and watch a discussion that I'll be having with 2 leaders in the field of providing childcare and mental health and other services to kids and their parents throughout the state. To see how they're continuing to meet the needs of families who need a little extra support when we have to do all these things remotely for the last 2 months. So I think we'll learn a lot about why their work is so important, how it's been challenged by this, and some of the challenges to ramping back up to normal activity whenever that happens, assuming it does. So tonight, the first of the 3 things I want to talk about is something that the governor brought up at his press conference today, and I had a chance to talk with him yesterday in advance about it. And it was what appears to be a very, very bad situation that played out in the town of Hartford. And the facts, I was not there, so the facts are as I've heard them from the governor directly, is that a family who have moved to Vermont but continue to have out-of-state plates from their previous residence were backing out of a driveway, and someone else pulled up and sort of blocked them in and started laying into them verbally to the effect of, "We don't want you here, you shouldn't have come to Vermont," and other things which seem to have a racial element because the individual is African American and his 11-year-old child was in the back. So obviously it's exactly the worst kind of behavior if the facts are what they appear to be. As I say, not there, but it was a significant enough experience with the facts being clear enough that the governor wanted to make sure that it was not misunderstood what our public orders have been, because apparently the individual who verbally abused this man and his kid had said something, "Even our governor doesn't want you here," with a certain potential racial element to it, in addition to people coming to Vermont from out of state. So the governor did call to clarify and apologize to the family, but also clarify that when he has said, if you're thinking about visiting Vermont, we'd like you not to. That is, first of all, a public health issue with absolutely no prejudice or discrimination built into it. But also, we shouldn't wrongly assume anything about people who are here driving around. A Vermonter may very well have out-of-state plates for whatever reason, but be rightly here at his or her home, in his or her community. It could be a rental car for all we know. So there's the issue of being confrontational to others in the first place, which is a real problem. Obviously, the racial prejudice, which appears to have been at the root of at least part of the verbal comments that were made, are unjust. They're indefensible at any time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm glad the governor confronted this head on and clarified that nothing in his comments have been intended at all to promote this kind of direct confrontation or absolutely any bias of any kind, ranging from the worst kind of racial prejudice down to a negative attitude towards people who happen to not live in Vermont. So it's just a reminder for all of us that we have to call on our best selves at all times. And of course, if any of us observe that kind of thing, to snuff it out immediately. The second thing I want to talk about, the governor issued some additional loosening of economic activity today, and I've received a number of questions from constituents who were somewhat confused by it. And it indicated that lodging establishments would be able to open up effective May 22nd with some limited operations, I believe up to 25% capacity. The constraints on that opening up of lodging establishments is that the people who could be booked to be there beginning on the 22nd are Vermont residents or out-of-state residents who can prove that they have gone through a 14-day quarantine. And I've received a number of questions saying, well, how can you prove that there's been a 14-day quarantine that's been met? And the short story is, I can't for the life of me figure out how that would happen. So, like many things in these fast-moving, although the days seem slow sometimes, but these fast-moving reactions we have to COVID-19, the policy of loosening up the lodging restrictions precedes the guidance to say exactly how that will work. It does seem to mean that for people who want to do what they call staycations and visit some other part of Vermont, that there will be some opportunity for that. In conversations with the governor, whether it's retail, lodging, or ultimately restaurants, the thinking is to do these kind of percentage increases. So now it's 25%. The next time it might be 50%, then it might be 75%. There will certainly be requirements related to how much cleaning has to happen, where it has to happen, use of common spaces, all those things. But I think it's one more sign that we're trying to marry the public health outcomes that we're seeing with some easing of restrictions. I have also asked the governor directly about the issue of when restaurants will be able to open to patrons, not just curbside. And largely because I've heard from many in the restaurant industry who say that knowing when they'll be able to begin some operations is the important thing. Not so much the date, but having predictability for planning purposes. And at this time, the governor does not know when that is going to happen. However, on Friday, and this takes me to point 3, Friday is May 15th, which normally would be perhaps just another mid-month day, but marks the end of the existing stay-at-home order. The governor intends to extend the stay-at-home order while also providing some additional turning of his proverbial spigot to allow more economic activity. He has indicated that some information regarding restaurants may occur during that stay-at-home order. So for anyone in the restaurant industry who has been looking for a little bit more clarity, I can't say that the executive order will tell you everything you want to know or even be exactly what you hope for. It will start the process of conditioning some reopening for patrons. That might be for outdoor seating. I do know there's been some concern by those restaurants that do not have outdoor seating, and so the question of fairness of allowing some restaurants to open and not others. So I don't quite know what the details will be, but something is forthcoming on Friday when the stay-at-home order is extended. I have received a number of questions today from self-employed and independent contractors who have been collecting the federal PUA benefit, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, and they have wondered why the payment this week has not come in. And I've heard it from dozens of people, and these are not just the people who've struggled all along to get their benefits, but people who have been getting their checks wondering why this week's isn't shown up. I did a bit of investigating, and the Department of Labor was making a software fix to correct some errors in their system, which they had hoped would have been completed this past weekend, but have not yet done it. So they had sent out, and this is always the danger with these things, they had sent out an email saying that the checks or deposits would be in people's hands earlier this week. When it doesn't happen, of course, it's just one more reason why people throw their arms up and say, wow, this thing, they just can't seem to fix it. I have been encouraged to believe that they're working on it as we speak, and they expect the money to be in people's bank accounts and the checks to be out by the end of this week, so within the next 2 days. So if anyone if Thursday or Friday comes, you haven't received your PUA funds from the state, please get in touch with me, preferably by email, because it's easier for me to then help you address that problem when you do that. So I'm going to sign off for tonight and remind you tomorrow night will be a very interesting discussion with two providers of childcare and other services to kids and families. And I think what's going to be most interesting is the insights they'll offer about how it's not so straightforward to say we're just going to open up childcare facilities, because there's a lot going on for staff, families, and the facilities themselves to make that come to be. So hope you'll join me tomorrow at 5:30 for that. I also may spend some time during the day and do kind of a pop-up live video to talk about the childcare guidelines, which are being issued sometime late today. They might have already been issued, but I hadn't seen them yet. And so it's, of course, of interest to many people, but maybe not as of general interest of the kind that I've tried to bring to these updates. So be on the lookout for an event invite for me on Facebook tomorrow, and hopefully I'll be able to provide some clarity, because I know many families are wondering when and how their kids will be back enrolled in childcare, how that's all going to work out. So I'll do my best to provide maybe a midday report on that. And with that, I'm going to sign off and say thank you for staying tuned. This is the 2-month anniversary of the day the State House got shut down, when we voted to close it down because it was no longer safe. It seems like a million years ago, but it was 2 months ago, and we have been, like everybody else, working remotely, which has been a great challenge, but people have really figured it out the best they can. So I know that the very small sacrifice we've had to make as your elected officials in the state Senate and the State House pales in comparison to what people out there who've lost jobs and work in frontline jobs have had to endure. So, and small business owners who are struggling, wondering if they're going to be able to open back up. So I'm not putting our situation on par, but just saying that we in some ways, we are all in this together in terms of experiencing these weird days. And talk to you tomorrow at 5:30. Thanks.